They expected nothing more than a routine court hearing until a stray dog wandered in uninvited. In a single jaw-dropping moment, this unassuming canine changed not just one but two people's lives forever. Courtroom 2B of the city's towering judicial center rarely saw anything remarkable. Week after week, lawyers presented their cases, defendants awaited verdicts, and the audience in the gallery shifted with each docket call. It was supposed to be just another day, a routine hearing with a looming custody dispute, a minor property claim, and a slow-moving line of traffic infractions. Outside, the sun beat down on bustling sidewalks as a stray dog weaved through pedestrians, searching for scraps or a hint of shelter. No one inside the courthouse realized that the hungry canine had followed a trail of scents right up to the imposing glass doors. Nor did they anticipate it might slip in behind a busy clerk carrying a load of files, unnoticed by the guards distracted at the metal detectors. Moments later, as a tense dispute over child custody took center stage in courtroom 2B, the dog's curious nose led it through a half-open doorway. Court officials, too occupied with legal formalities, failed to notice the scruffy shadow crossing the threshold. At first, the dog merely sniffed around empty benches, its nose quivering at the faint scent of stress and fear in the air. Then, as if drawn by an unseen thread, it wandered down the aisle, halting near two individuals who each faced a life-changing decision. At the judge's bench, one was a young mother fighting for custody of her toddler. The other, seated just behind her, was a defendant in a small claims matter, quiet and burdened by an uncertain fate. The dog paused, its tail flicking uncertainly. A hush fell as the bailiff realized they had an unplanned witness in the room. What happened next would stun the gallery into silence and tilt the scales of justice in a way no one could have predicted. For the stray dog's simple, impulsive action, born of neither training nor human guidance, would unravel the tension-gripping two separate cases, unveiling hidden truths and forging unexpected bonds. In the hush of that pivotal moment, even the presiding judge was left speechless, struggling to maintain the dignity of the courtroom while confronting the revelation that sometimes a stray's unassuming presence can illuminate compassion and shift destinies more powerfully than any well-crafted argument or stern verdict. The bailiff's stunned shout, "There's a dog loose in here," rippled across courtroom 2B like an unexpected thunderclap. Heads turned, lips parted in surprise. At the defense table, a young mother named Rebecca froze mid-sentence, her plea for custody tangling in her throat. On the opposite side of the aisle, an older man called Mr. Hernandez, embroiled in a small claims battle, stared at the scruffy creature padding down the aisle. The dog seemed oblivious to the commotion it caused, sniffing the carpet, its tail wagging in tentative, uneven sweeps. "Bailiff, remove that animal at once," Judge Mathers commanded, tapping his gavel in displeasure. He was a tall, silver-haired figure known for strict courtroom decorum. A police officer rose from his seat near the door, moving cautiously toward the dog. But just as he reached out, the stray darted away, weaving through a row of empty chairs until it paused near two people who appeared equally startled: Rebecca, who stood next to her public defender, and Mr. Hernandez, who clutched a stack of papers in his trembling hands. Rebecca's day had been fraught even before this bizarre intrusion. Her custody hearing for her 3-year-old son was on the brink. She'd lost her job 2 months ago, fallen behind on rent, and now her ex-partner argued she was unfit. Though she had a sliver of hope that her sincerity would shine through, the atmosphere felt grim. The opposing lawyer hammered on her financial instability, undermining her pleas to keep primary custody. So when the dog scampered up to her, pressing its damp nose against her calf, Rebecca could only gape. In the hush that settled, she felt her heart skip as the dog gazed at her with gentle eyes, as if sensing her distress. Likewise, Mr. Hernandez, gray at the temples and worn by the stress of a pending eviction, blinked in surprise when the dog pivoted toward him. He was due to face the judge momentarily about a rent dispute with his landlord. With limited English skills and no legal aid, he'd been dreading this hearing, feeling cornered by the possibility of losing what little he had. Now, a stray dog had paused before him, its tail wagging in slow, uncertain arcs, as if pulled by an invisible tether to the building tension in the room. By now, courtroom spectators craned their necks, wondering if this was some orchestrated stunt or an omen. The dog edged closer to the battered man, sniffing the cuff of his frayed pants. Rebecca and Mr. Hernandez briefly locked eyes, sharing a flash of mutual bewilderment. In that silent exchange, an unexpected kinship flickered. Both felt vulnerable, clinging to hope that the system might show them mercy they couldn't afford to secure otherwise. "Officer, get that animal out of here," Judge Mathers repeated, more forceful this time, though a hint of curiosity etched his lined face. The police officer lunged again, but the dog slipped away behind Mr. Hernandez's chair, evading capture with a graceful twist. A few audience members stifled laughter. Others held their breath, uncertain how the judge might retaliate. Then, as if guided by some deeper instinct, the dog approached the judge's bench itself, ignoring the bailiff's frantic calls. Judge Mathers, gavel raised, looked scandalized. Yet, instead of barking or panicking under the intensifying commands, the dog simply laid itself down near the base of the bench, like it belonged there. Its eyes flicked between the judge, Rebecca, and Mr. Hernandez. The spectacle was so surreal that, for a moment, no one moved. Breaking the spell, the bailiff advanced, arms outstretched to grab the dog by the scruff. But then, something profound happened. Rebecca, heart pounding, took an impulsive step forward. "Don't hurt him," she pleaded softly, surprising even herself. Her eyes, already brimming with tears from the custody hearing, overflowed with compassion for this stray, who looked just as lost and vulnerable as she felt. Mr. Hernandez, too, rose from his seat, murmuring in accented English, "He's just scared." In that fleeting beat, the dog's presence ignited a wave of empathy that bridged the adversarial space. The judge, sensing an unusual shift in courtroom dynamics, lowered his gavel, deciding to pause the proceedings. "Hold on," he said, voice calmer. "Bailiff, see if the dog's collar has any identification." The officer hesitated, blinking at the judge's abrupt pivot. "But, Your Honor, I don't think." Judge Mathers cut him off with a stern glance. "Do it carefully. I won't have chaos in my courtroom." With that, the officer slowly approached, coaxing the dog with gentler gestures. The stray, quivering but not aggressive, allowed him to check for a tag. Finding none, the bailiff shook his head. "No collar. No chip. Nothing." Judge Mathers tapped his gavel lightly, exhaling in frustration. "Ridiculous. Let's call animal control." But in the crowd, someone piped up, "Don't do that. He might be put down if he's unclaimed." Another voice echoed, "He's harmless." The judge's expression remained stern. This was a court of law, not an animal shelter. Yet, the dog's quiet presence cast a surprising hush of compassion. Even the clerk, who often looked bored during routine dockets, seemed transfixed by this intrusion, as though a stray dog had revealed the raw humanity behind every case. In the momentary lull, Rebecca found courage surging up. She approached the bench, tears still damp on her cheeks. "Your Honor," she said softly, "he might be lost, but he's not worthless, just like some of us." Her voice cracked, referencing her own precarious situation. Though she didn't finish the thought, the judge frowned, taken aback by her uninvited input but intrigued nonetheless. Meanwhile, Mr. Hernandez stood at the edge of the room, placing his stack of eviction-related papers on a nearby seat. Wanting to speak yet unsure if his limited English could articulate the dog's significance, he simply nodded. Judge Mathers, acknowledging the dog's calm submission at the bench, made a decision. "Bailiff, hold off on animal control for a moment. Let's settle these cases quickly, then we'll address the dog's fate." A ripple of relief followed, especially from Rebecca and Mr. Hernandez, who both felt inexplicable concern for this stray. The judge had chosen compassion. And in courtroom 2B, that choice would change everything. Ms. Hawkins, watching from the back row, realized she had just witnessed something far beyond the usual courtroom drama. A silent dog had softened hearts, spurred empathy, and brought two strangers together in an unspoken bond of compassion. As they left the courthouse, an extraordinary connection formed around the stray's presence. Mr. Hernandez walked away with a reprieve from eviction under a new partial payment plan, while Rebecca left with a glimmer of hope in her custody battle, determined to stabilize her life. The dog, wagging its way down the marble steps, had not just one but two people ready to stand by it, each carrying a fresh sense that kindness and solidarity, embodied by a nameless stray, could transform even the bleakest legal disputes into moments of grace. Days passed, yet the dog's unexpected intervention in courtroom 2B lingered in the minds of all who had witnessed it, especially Mr. Hernandez and Rebecca. Both had left that day sharing a bewildered smile, the stray padding along beside them, unsure of where to go next. Rebecca's distant uncle, Martin, an older man with a fatherly presence, hovered close, offering translations for Mr. Hernandez's limited English. Their conversation meandered until they agreed on a simple plan. They would take the dog to a local shelter to scan for a microchip or any sign of an owner. That afternoon, they found themselves at a small, volunteer-run animal rescue. The dog, though skittish, ambled inside with a wagging tail, possibly comforted by the gentle atmosphere of the place. Dozens of adoptable cats and dogs greeted them with curious or hopeful eyes. A harried volunteer approached, scanning the dog with a handheld microchip reader. After a few tense heartbeats, she shook her head. "No chip, no ID, he's a complete mystery." Mr. Hernandez exhaled, relieved that no legal owner would suddenly appear. Rebecca and Martin exchanged glances, unsure whether to feel relieved or saddened. Had the dog been abandoned outright? Then, the volunteer surprised them. "We do have a wait list for fosters. If you're willing to foster him, we can help with vaccines and spay-neuter costs." Martin translated for Mr. Hernandez, who nodded with interest. He had space in his backyard, assuming his landlord allowed it. But Rebecca felt a tug at her heart. She recalled how the dog had nuzzled her leg in the courtroom at the exact moment she'd needed comfort. Her finances were shaky, but maybe caring for the dog would bring some solace to her lonely nights while she fought for custody. Sensing Rebecca's hesitation, Mr. Hernandez proposed a compromise: shared fostering. They could alternate care on a weekly basis until they sorted out their personal challenges. The dog's presence might help them both. At first, the idea seemed absurd, two near strangers splitting custody of a stray dog. But the volunteer at the desk, eyes lighting up at the unusual arrangement, encouraged them. "If you keep good communication and the dog adjusts, it might work. It's better than leaving him in a kennel." Encouraged by this small endorsement, they sketched out a tentative plan. On weekdays, Mr. Hernandez would keep the dog while Rebecca worked her part-time diner job. On weekends, the dog would stay with Rebecca, giving Mr. Hernandez time to handle extra shifts at the warehouse where he'd recently secured employment. They purchased a cheap leash, some dog food, and exchanged phone numbers. The dog, caught in a swirl of new scents and voices, wagged its tail at both of them, as if forging an agreement of its own. Neither caretaker had expected to see the other again outside the tense courtroom setting, yet here they were, bound together by a dog who had wandered in unannounced. The dog's presence soon reshaped both of their lives. For Mr. Hernandez, coming home from a long day at the warehouse to find a wagging tail at the door provided a comfort he hadn't realized he needed. He shared scraps from his dinner, fresh tortillas or leftover rice, to supplement the store-bought kibble, always apologizing to the dog that he couldn't afford better food. The dog, indifferent to brands, devoured each meal with gratitude, its tail thumping happily against the kitchen floor. Even the landlord, previously hostile, softened. "Just keep him quiet and clean up after him," he muttered, reluctantly allowing the pet to stay. For Rebecca, the weekends with the dog were a welcome distraction from her custody battle. Walking him around the block gave her a sense of purpose, and to her surprise, neighbors who had previously kept their distance now offered friendly waves or stopped to chat. One evening, when she ran into her ex-partner while out with the dog, even he seemed intrigued. "Where'd you get that dog? He looks well-fed." Hesitantly, Rebecca recounted the strange courtroom incident, explaining how the dog had wandered in and, somehow, softened the entire proceeding. Her ex, though still skeptical of her financial situation, seemed disarmed. "Maybe you're not as alone as I thought," he muttered. It wasn't much, but it was something, perhaps even a shift in her custody fight. Meanwhile, the dog became a quiet legend in the neighborhood. People who had been in the courtroom that day gossiped about the courtroom dog and how it had changed the outcome of two cases. Some joked that the dog should be trained as a therapy animal. Others whispered that it might have been an angel in disguise. Despite the growing goodwill, both Rebecca and Mr. Hernandez faced challenges. Mr. Hernandez still struggled to meet rent deadlines, and Rebecca's custody battle loomed, demanding proof of stable employment and housing. Each worried, in private moments, whether their fragile hold on stability would collapse. And yet, neither could bear the thought of giving up the dog. Over time, their co-parenting arrangement became routine. Every Monday, the dog transitioned from Rebecca's small apartment to Mr. Hernandez's home, and every Friday, Rebecca picked him up again. At first, the dog whined and paced anxiously with each switch, but soon, it adapted, greeting both caretakers with equal joy. Their texts became more frequent, not just about the dog's needs but about life. Got extra diner shifts this week. Hope it helps with custody case. Warehouse slow this month. Cutting expenses, but we're managing. Through these brief exchanges, a surprising friendship formed. Even Rebecca's Uncle Martin, who occasionally helped translate their conversations, noticed the shift. It wasn't just about the dog anymore. They had become each other's support system in a world that had otherwise left them to fend for themselves. And then word reached the judge. He had heard the rumors, how the dog now lived in shared custody between two former strangers, how it had helped stabilize their lives. And so, he began considering an unprecedented move, an upcoming hearing that might combine their separate legal battles into a single, shared decision, one that would challenge not just the law but the very notion of what it meant to build a family. No one, not even the dog's most ardent admirers, could have predicted what was coming next. The shared custody of the stray dog, whom they eventually named Chance, continued to bring Rebecca and Mr. Hernandez together in unexpected ways. What started as an arrangement of convenience slowly evolved into something resembling a makeshift family. The dog, oblivious to the complexities of human lives, trotted happily between the two homes, basking in the love and care of his two guardians. One chilly afternoon, Rebecca received a court notice. Her final custody hearing had been scheduled for the following month. The weight of it settled heavily on her shoulders. Though she had been working tirelessly to prove her financial stability, her case was still precarious. She needed a character reference, someone who could attest to her growth and stability. To her own surprise, the first person who came to mind was Mr. Hernandez. Nervous but determined, she invited him to a local coffee shop to discuss the possibility of him testifying on her behalf. As they sat down, Chance curled up at their feet, tail wagging lazily. "I know this is a big ask," Rebecca admitted, stirring her coffee. "But you've seen how much my life has changed since I started caring for Chance. You've seen how responsible I am. If you could just vouch for me in court." Mr. Hernandez, sipping his tea thoughtfully, nodded. "Rebecca, you have a good heart. I have seen how much you care. If my words can help you keep your child, I will do it." Gratitude welled up in her eyes, but before she could speak, Mr. Hernandez sighed heavily. "But I also have news. My landlord is raising the rent again. I cannot afford to stay unless I find another job soon." Rebecca's relief turned to concern. If Mr. Hernandez was forced to move, what would happen to Chance? What would happen to the bond they had built? The thought unsettled her more than she expected. "We'll figure something out," she said quickly. "There has to be another way." Days passed, and Rebecca did everything she could to strengthen her case for custody while also helping Mr. Hernandez search for work. The two leaned on each other more than ever, and their connection deepened. Then, one evening as Rebecca was walking Chance near the courthouse, she noticed a flyer pinned to a bulletin board. Local animal therapy programs seeking volunteers. Her heart skipped a beat. She had heard people joking about Chance becoming a therapy dog before, but what if it wasn't a joke? What if Chance could help others the way he had helped them? Excited, she ran home and called Mr. Hernandez. "What if we register Chance as a therapy dog? There are programs that work with kids, seniors, even people in court cases. If we do this together, it could help us both. It could even help your financial situation." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then a chuckle. "You think our little courtroom dog is ready for a real job? I think he was made for it." And so, they began the process of training Chance for therapy work. The application process was rigorous, but both Rebecca and Mr. Hernandez threw themselves into it. The dog who had once wandered into a courtroom by accident was now learning to provide comfort in official capacities. He was tested for temperament, trained for calmness, and assessed for his ability to provide emotional support. Months passed, and by the time Rebecca's final custody hearing arrived, Chance had completed his certification. The judge, intrigued by the dog's journey, listened as Mr. Hernandez spoke about Rebecca's transformation. When Rebecca herself testified, she spoke not only of her progress but of the unexpected community she had found in Mr. Hernandez and Chance. The ruling came in her favor. She was granted joint custody of her daughter, with the possibility of full custody if she continued to prove stability. As she left the courthouse, overwhelmed with emotion, Mr. Hernandez was waiting outside with Chance. "You did it," he said warmly. "We did it," she corrected. Their journey wasn't over. Mr. Hernandez still had housing concerns, and Rebecca still had to build her future. But together, with Chance at their side, they had created something neither of them had expected, a bond strong enough to change their lives. As they walked away from the courthouse that day, Chance pranced ahead of them, leading them not just forward, but toward a future filled with hope.